experience of getting laid off?
One of the hardest things that I'd ever gone through. I imagined retiring with the company. I was there for the journey. I was with a great company that took care of its people, and hard business decisions had to be made. Well, I took it very, very personally, and I struggled a lot with it, questioning my self-worth. I went into a depression. I had anxiety about it because my whole world, my full self was wrapped up in that identity. I had a goal. It took me a long time. I struggled. It didn't matter how great you were, how high-level performer, there was no going back. And so, like, from someone who, had a dream, and I felt like it was crushed.
All right, here we are with Jada Powell, corporate operator of $224 million revenue oversight, oversaw 1,000 brokers with Sysco, very large company, laid off during COVID, and started over building from scratch. You pivoted into a completely different industry with oil and gas and energy niche with apparel. Now you're scaling business again, and I understand you have some new ventures in the works, which we'll get into. You're an entrepreneur, you're a mom, and much, much more. So welcome, Jada Powell. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate this. Before we get into your Sysco experience and your entrepreneurial experience and the new ventures that you're doing that we'll talk about, give us a little sense, kind of go way back to what made Jada Powell into an executive, an entrepreneur.
I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm honored to be a guest and to share my story and hopefully help some people, because I've gone through a lot of challenges in my life, but in the end, it's made me a better person, a better mom, a better entrepreneur. I think it starts from birth, right? I'm the oldest of three. So I am naturally a people pleaser. I am, in charge of my sisters. I'm in charge of anything else. So from a very early age, I feel like I've been born to lead, right? Because of my place in the family and how it was. So I was always what you would call an overachiever in school. I was very involved in sports, activities. Life was great. I went to college at Florida State University, changed my major about 4 times. So first, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I wanted to go into pre-medicine, and I did that for a year. So I pivoted. I thought I still wanted to stay into healthcare, so I pivoted to nutrition, right? So you can get out with a 4-year degree, you can still be involved. I had a passion for it. Being involved in sports my whole life and seeing the true picture of an athlete isn't just how they perform on the field, it's how you feel your body and how you take it. I decided, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I figured, there's a safe bet. No matter what I decide to do with the rest of my life when I get out of here, I can do business. So the whole time, from the time I was 14, back then, when you were 14, you could be a hostess at a mom and pop restaurant. And so I started there. As soon as I was 16, I was able to serve tables, and so I started my whole working life in restaurants. My mother was in restaurants, my grandmother was in restaurants, so it was kind of in my blood. And I thought, well, maybe I'll pivot I'll get this degree, I'll minor in hospitality, learn about hotels, maybe go into that, maybe do more restaurants. And so finally I graduated, and the first job that I got out of college was with a company that's based here in Texas called Pappas Restaurant. I learned so much. I learned to be front of the house manager. I quickly got into the back of the house, and even though I had no culinary training, I really got hands-on training how to make mother sauces and do all the fun things. So I was loving life.
So many moving parts in the restaurant industry. It's such a great training ground for future kind of entrepreneurial or even executive level experiences, because you're just juggling so much and nothing ever goes 100% the way you want it. There's always a fire to put out.
Okay. The core of it is the customer, right? How are you taking care of the customer? And I think being that person in the hospitality, being the front of the house manager, dealing with tables when things go wrong, that's trained me for how I deal with problems today. Empathy, active listening, making sure I'm understanding the problem and offering a solution that's acceptable to everyone. So, that's where I spent like 20 years in the business. My husband and I decided that we wanted to move back to Florida. So I became the general manager of a restaurant called Houston Apparel in Tallahassee. We moved back, and that was my first real general manager experience. It was great. I did it for a couple of years, and I'm getting towards my 30s now, and we think maybe it's time to start having kids. So I was like, well, here I am. I'm at a crossroads again. What do I do? I had a really good relationship with my Sysco rep, who I had pretty much always used. They're the only food service distributor that I was very familiar with. So Sysco is the world's largest food service provider, anything from meats to heavy equipment, anything that a restaurant needs. We sell ourselves as consulting services to help restaurants succeed. So we're not just pushing French fries in your back door. We're making sure that your menu's set up correctly. Are you set up for success? Because the restaurant business is a penny business. But people are shocked when I tell them that, but it's really hard to make money in the restaurant industry. Sysco was very good at teaching me how to be a consultative seller, how to create value of myself and the things that I knew that could help operators be more successful. So great experience. I started there as a salesperson. We called them marketing associates at the time. I was a marketing associate for a few years, and then I got my first chance to lead a team outside of the restaurant, which was super exciting. I had to move back to Georgia to do it, not far from where we lived, but I had to take over a whole brand new territory, brand new people that I had been working with, and so I grew that district in Georgia for 2 years and had an opportunity that the district manager of Tallahassee was getting promoted, and so they moved me back. And so I spent 2 more years there and managed my old team, managing people who used to be your teammates. That's a whole other conversation. I think because I had such deep relationships as a teammate that my leadership style is very welcoming. I'm not the one leader. Like, I have a very much team aspect because I know the people on the team know way more than what I do in that position, what's going on with their clients, because they're in there every day in those restaurants seeing what's going on. And, we always have corporate initiatives. That's a struggle, right? In a big corporation, you have to follow the initiatives while also satisfying your clients. So, being that sounding board.
And they can have frank conversations with you because they know you, they know they can bring something to you, what they can discuss. And it's interesting because we're going to get into Sysco and your achievements there and what you were overseeing. But just before that, do you think that having had those relationships as colleagues makes it a lot easier? I would imagine it does, than them hiring an outside manager and all of a sudden is I'm your boss, but there's zero connection. Yeah.
I think it can be a challenge for sure. I definitely, because I had fostered such good relationships with my team, they respected me as a salesperson. So I just have to build respect as their leader, like know that they can follow me into the fire and I have their back. I've got them. And so that's kind of how I honed my leadership skills working with people. And I had seen other people in the company do that in other areas where it was very common in our industry to be a salesperson and get promoted to the district manager. And so I've seen a lot of folks not do it the right way. Okay, I know how I have to do this. I have to continue to be true to myself, who I have been, understand the pressures coming from both sides, and be that filter in between to help keep things moving and get the job done and take care of the client.
And along the way, you suddenly find yourself overseeing a couple $100 million, 1,000 brokers, right? And so you had a huge responsibility having started pretty much at the bottom. How did you progress through it? Was that just a natural progression? What were the hills and valleys?
So I took a big leap. I was very comfortable in Tallahassee with the people that I had known for years, the clients that loved me, loved our team, that wouldn't go anywhere. But I knew that I wanted to do something more, and I had a 5-year plan. At the end of the day, I want to run an operating company. How Sysco works in the United States, there's 72 different operating companies around the United States. And my goal will be over hundreds of employees that directly impacted customers. So I had a plan, I had my mentors, and I was on that track.
Was that something that their management team encouraged, or were you kind of like a mini entrepreneur within this large corporation?
I'm like, I want to go work in corporate. I want to learn. There's so much that I don't know. And this company is huge, and there's so much opportunity. And if this is where I want to go, I've got to be flexible. And I've got to look for other opportunities. Not that people weren't looking out for me and helping me develop as a leader, but if I want to do something else, that's on me. So it was kind of good timing. Our children were very young. And I started looking on Sysco's website at the corporate opportunities, and I found a position that they were working in with a completely non-sales job. It was Director of Category Management and Strategic Broker Network. It's huge because that's part of sourcing and procurement. I didn't know anything about it, and that intrigued me. I wanted to learn that piece of the business. Yes, I want to do it. The piece that I did have familiarity with was the brokers. So brokers are manufacturers' representatives. So Heinz Ketchup goes out and hires a brokerage to go represent their products in the field with Sysco sales reps. So they go work with the sales reps. They go in to see clients. They try to make conversions to their products. They do sales presentations, all those things. And I had seen how brokers can be beneficial, and I had seen how they're terrible, right? So I had a really good, unique perspective on how they needed to be managed from the corporate level, because I knew what a good broker was, and I could train Sysco's strategic brokers on how to get their people more activated in the field to sell more products. Because at the end of the day, that's what we were trying to do. We're trying to sell more product and partner with our clients and make them successful. So we're along for the ride. So I brought that perspective, and I think that's what landed. My former boss then told me the reason why he hired me. The first thing I asked you was, why are you here? What are you trying to do? And I said, my goal is to be an OpCo president in 5 years. And he's like, I knew I had to have you right then. And so being driven and being upfront with your goals, I think is huge. There's so many opportunities. I was afforded a great experience there.
But it's interesting because so many opportunities afforded, but you went for it. So many people are afraid to tell their boss they have aspirations for whatever reason. Maybe fear of rejection, maybe fear that the boss will laugh, maybe the fear that the coworkers won't like them. But you had the fortitude to say, hey, this is what I want to do, and I actually have a plan. And that conversation years later resulted in you being promoted. Talk to me about what does it mean to oversee $224 million in revenue? What does that mean?
Wow, it's a big responsibility, especially when you don't control the output, right? My job was to develop a system that the strategic brokers could take to the field to employ to make those sales. So it came from me looking at my operators, my group of operators, how we can make them successful, to really overseeing the entire organization of sales from an outside vendor perspective on how we can turn that into revenue dollars for the company. But here I had to oversee an entire overhaul of a back-end system that we use for our salespeople to see marked the right representative broker to the product. And there was no good system at Sysco to really keep track of all of that.
It's important.
And keep the information accurate, because there's nothing more frustrating than a salesperson who's hot on a lead calling a number. They think they're going to get immediate help, and they're like, no, sorry, I don't know who handles that anymore. It kind of derails them, and they don't pick it back up. They'll just move on to the next thing, right? And so I knew there was a problem, huge problem. So we fixed it. I didn't know anything about technology or our back-end systems or any of these things, but I led a team to do it. And I was very proud of that, because here I am, just a salesperson from the field, right? And now really impacting a business unit.
What kind of impact did that have? So you identify a problem, you figure out how to Band-Aid and rubber glue or whatever and fix it. I mean, did you guys ever do like kind of a postmortem analysis and see like how many millions of dollars that added to the bottom line?
Significant, because it took, even though it took over a year, all the external stakeholders, all of the external information that we had to make sure was correct, and create a process where if changes were made, there was a way to immediately change them in the system. So
it was leakage that was going on for who knows how long, and instead of growing the company and trying to grow and find, new restaurants or whatever to service, there was this internal leakage that you guys found and fixed. Within Sysco, what did you learn about scale that most entrepreneurs don't see?
It's a struggle. So I learned agility. I learned how to navigate the different stakeholders that I had to influence to get on board in a timely manner to make all these changes happen. So I know that there needs to be a process in place, but you have to be able to influence the stakeholders along the way to be able to drive the result faster. And so that takes time. It takes, just like anything else, building relationships with the people that you're asking to do this work for you, right? To benefit everyone. So that was one thing I learned. Taking as an entrepreneur, it's kind of, you understand that processes and systems have to be there, but they should not hamstring you to get the results, right? And so that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned. Like, I need these systems and I need these processes.
Systems matter, processes matter, everything kind of can break down. Speaking of that, managing 1,000 brokers, I mean, what breaks at that level, right?
So it's just taking all of that information, how do you funnel it, right, to make something? And everyone's always going to have an opinion, but staying true to the story, like, what are we trying to accomplish? Because a lot of times that's easy to get sideways on, right? And so that's one of the things too that I learned. Like, you have to take all of this with a grain of salt. A lot of it was true. And then how do I take information from the field that I know is customer pain points? And then how do I take this organization and meet them in the middle to make something that works for both parties, that isn't disruptive to sales, that isn't disruptive to the client, and only produces revenue?
If it doesn't produce revenue and impact the bottom line, right? Ultimately, that's the point. So in such a large corporation with this high-level title and you're overseeing 1,000 brokers, you have so much power, which gets you only so far. So how do you manage influence in that type of an organization? across the network?
I think it's understanding who you're talking to. Why does what I'm saying matter to them? So I have to understand, what is their hesitation? What is this going to impact for them? What do they have on their plate outside of what I'm asking them to do that can impact the timeline? So I think it's just being open and honest, having realistic conversations like, hey, I understand this isn't a priority for you, but here's how it's going to affect the organization. How can we fix it? How can we get it slid into your schedule? Or how can you work with this other department to make this happen? And so a lot of it is listening, understanding, and having good relationships with people that they trust me. I'm not trying to create this extra work for them. I'm not trying to sabotage them. The end goal of what we're trying to do, we're on the same team. And acknowledging they have other priorities. I think that's huge, because people are just like, oh, here they come. They just want stuff from me. Like, no, I understand that you have other things on your plate. I want you to want to help me. And I'm going to explain it to you in that way. Like, here's how it's going to impact you, how it's going to make you look better, and how it's going to impact our customer, because that's who we're here to serve.
So you're in this large corporation, you are generating hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, you're overseeing all of these teams. What was your hardest leadership moment?
There were many, right? Because I went from a relatively small team of 11 people to managing external things that I couldn't really control, I had to influence. And so again, taking feedback from the field to the people who weren't directly involved with the field, right? Because you have your different layers of management. The brokers have the same thing, the other streets, and peeling back all the layers and figuring out where the issues were. And sometimes I had to call out my own company and people when they weren't doing things right. And that's hard, very hard, but it's important for the greater good of what we're trying to do. You have to be very non-confrontational. You have to understand what they're saying, but then you also have to communicate, this is why we're doing it this way. And that's hard. It's never easy.
So corporate politics versus performance, which would you say is more important in your experience in that environment?
I think it's performance. If we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing, the company is naturally going to benefit, the customers are going to naturally benefit. Where we get off the rails is doing work for work's sake and doing work that isn't going to impact the bottom line. And so a lot of times you have to peel back all the, like, why are we doing this? What is the end result? And if there isn't a tangible result that is going to benefit the client or the bottom line, then you have to, because people would come to me all the time with ideas and I'd be like, that's great, but how are we going to make this work? How is this going to help our clients? If you couldn't answer that, where did we go?
So what would you say, is that what separates high performance players from average players?
I think so. I feel that it's important to tell people the truth in a way that is not going to attack them personally. And I think people really appreciate that. When someone is upfront and honest, that you take the time to listen to them, understand their concerns, and then explain it to try to understand where they're coming from, and then be able to diffuse or say, hey, I love the suggestion. You can't do that right now. Here's the direction I'm headed. I could really use your help deploying this into the field. What do you think? Yeah. And get their buy-in that way.
And my experience, when you start laying out the logic for why it doesn't make sense, and oftentimes it's things maybe they didn't think of because they're not at that vantage point. Right. They don't know all the parts that are moving, and getting that buy-in is necessary because you don't want to stifle someone from bringing future ideas. Yeah. You never know where that next big idea is going to come from, in my experience. So fast forward a little bit, we're at Sysco, this large corporation. We're doing great, we're having fun, we're building, and the world stops. COVID hits. Right? And so let's talk a little bit about that experience of getting laid off.
Honestly, it was probably one of the hardest things that I'd ever gone through. It's probably because I'd never imagined leaving Sysco. I imagined retiring with the company. I was there for the journey. I was with a great company that took care of its people. And hard business decisions had to be made. Yeah. And for someone who had never been laid off, who had never been fired, I took it very, very personally, and I struggled a lot with it, questioning my self-worth. I went into a depression. I had anxiety about it because my whole world, my whole self was wrapped up in that identity. I had a goal and I was getting it, and that's just my personality and who I am. And it took me a long time. I struggled. I know a lot of people did too, but at corporate, they had to lay off. They laid off 35% of the office team, and they laid off more in the field. It affected everyone. It didn't matter how great you were, how high performer, and there was no going back. And so it was hard, honestly say. Like, from someone who, had a dream that felt like it was crushed. Yeah. And so the positive of it is, I worked through that. And during the anxiety and during the depression, I was always the mom that's like, I'm too busy. I have young kids. I need something for their birthday party. I'm ordering it off of Etsy. Well, now we're all home. We're home with our kids. I was never like a crafty person. So this was way back, but had gotten, a vinyl cutting machine for Christmas as a gift. And I started designing t-shirts and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. This is so fulfilling to me. I have this creative side of my personality that I never knew existed. And so that brought me a lot of joy in really hard times. It was just like, okay, well maybe I can do this.
So just to finish off, first of all, thank you so much for sharing and being candid. I know millions of people went through it. Millions of really highly qualified people across so many different industries went through this. And it's something that really is never talked about. Was it scarier that you were losing your job and your identity, or that you didn't have the wherewithal anymore?
I didn't have the job and I had no plan B. That I wasn't stopping until it was done. And so that left me with a deep sense of, what do I do now? Like, where do I go now? Do I stay in food service? Do I try to do something else? Like a lot of questions. And like I said, myself was so wrapped up in my identity as a employee of Sysco and where I was going that I never stood back and thought about anything else being an option.
Yeah, you almost can't because you're so subsumed in improving this large entity that takes everything out of you. And last question on this point, and then we'll move on. What did your kids see during that time?
Yes, I lost my job, but people are dying around the world, right? These children that I have the honor to raise, I have been blessed with, like that should be my number one thought. And that's what I should be basing it on. What can I do to support them, to help grow them into the humans that they were meant to be, to give them every support that they need? I never thought like that. It was just like, go hard, make money, be successful, climb the ladder.
It's almost what we were taught our whole lives, our whole generation was, you get the corporate job, climb the ladder, and then the rug's pulled out from under everyone. And it did change perspective. So now we're moving from hard-charging executive overseeing thousands of people, hundreds of millions of dollars, big numbers, complicated systems, implementing change, making a huge difference, climbing that ladder to solopreneur. So let's talk about that venture and how that played out.
Sure. It started with me, finding this part of myself that I didn't know existed. And it brought, again, the joy that it brought me, and it made me think, okay, well, I know how a big corporation runs. Maybe I can start something on my own on a small scale. Maybe I can really do something with this, like start with the large orders of t-shirts and see how I can grow this into. So it kind of morphed from there. I built the plane as I was flying it.
And just for context, I think this was Dottie's Designs.
I know I can sell and I can make t-shirts, but like now this is a thing I'm forming. And so now I need to take what I learned at Sysco and dial it down to how can I grow this business. And so I had to learn a lot, like social media. I mean, I was on social media, right? But to be relevant today, you have to be on all the time. You have to be consistent in your message, what you're saying, what you do. So I had to learn all that. I had to learn how to market.
Use of social media. You're like, oh, I know how to use Instagram. It's like, no, not like this.
Use this to drive dollars to
Right.
And that's a whole other thing that I knew nothing about. So, I mean, I'd seen it, but I'd never tried to implement it. I was sales. So I really dug in and learned, like, what do I need to do? How do I need to market myself? How do I scale this business from 12 t-shirts to 1,200 t-shirts?
It's a bit of a jump. So in that 12 to 1,200 and growing out, what was your first failure as a solopreneur?
Over promising and under delivering, and said, I can do it for you, but I can do it in this time frame instead of killing myself, literally killing myself, me and my heat press, trying to get things done on time. And that's a hard lesson to learn too. And I feel because I don't want to tell people no, I didn't want to lose the business, I didn't want to disappoint anyone, but it's important to be upfront. This is what I can. I want to help you.
Well, this is what I can do in managing expectations. It's tough because you want to make your customers happy. The customer's always right, but you also need to survive. So what did you underestimate about entrepreneurship?
All of the things. Because you can look at someone and be like, oh, yeah, business, but if they have a team behind them, there's so much work that goes into it. But when it's just you, you're bootstrapping, you're starting from scratch, it's you. You are everything. And I struggled a lot with prioritizing too, right? How do I prioritize what needs to be done right now? I need to sell. I need to fulfill orders. I need to market to continue that I'm relevant, keep getting orders. I need to get out there and network so people know who I am, shaking hands, meeting people, telling them my story, what I do, and it's a lot.
You're doing sales, you're doing marketing, you're doing accounting, you're doing fulfillment, you're doing anything that comes up, running to FedEx, just everything. In running all of those different channels all by yourself, all these different hats you're wearing, what was the lowest moment of being a solopreneur?
I think realizing that I needed help. How was I going to afford it? But I couldn't continue working myself to death at the level that I was without getting help. At that time, someone came into my life, a competitor, and we lived in the same neighborhood, and she did the same thing that I did, but as a side hustle. She had the full-time job, but she did what I do on the side. She did different decoration techniques than I did. I got to meet her, and I really liked her. So we started doing business with each other, actually, because like I said, we did 2 different decoration techniques. She thought I did bleached blanks, and she did sublimation. So we had customers that would come to each of us that would want those things, and so we'd buy from each other. And we started a little friendship, and so one day she called me up, and she's like, hey, do you want to go for coffee? What do you think about partnering? Why don't we do this together? Why don't we take this bigger? What do you think? Well, she's a marketer by trade. I'm a salesperson. We had all these complementary things that were just like, this is a match made in heaven. Let's do this. And so an hour later, we left that Starbucks. We didn't have the name quite right yet, but a business was born, and that was the Houston Apparel company.
Before we get into that, the Houston Apparel company, when you were doing Dottie's Designs, you were a solopreneur, you're an entrepreneur, but you're wearing all these hats. Did you ever think that you should go back to corporate?
My husband did. You just have to give me time, right? It's time. So I did Dottie's for a year. Yeah, he sure wanted me to go back and get a corporate job because we struggled financially. I had a nice rate, salary, benefits, and to a solopreneur, trying to scrape by. And that put a real test on our relationship. And to this day, I tell him thank you for believing in me and sticking by me because it was very, very hard. We went through some financial turmoil. I mean, it wasn't easy, but I think we're closer because of it. But it was a really hard time for our family, having to scale back on things that we had always done and trying to figure out how to pay bills. It's not easy. And I applaud anyone who does it because I know how hard it can be, and you got to hang on for the ride.
What's the biggest lie about being a solopreneur?
Oh, that I just go and do whatever I want all day long. I just show up at networking events, go to lunches, do all the things people don't see. I say I'm like a duck, cool, calm, and collected on the surface, and I'm paddling like hell underneath. I don't see that. And that's what people do. Oh, you're always out networking. When do you get your work done? I'm like, you don't know.
Or people have this vision of a solopreneur on the beach on their laptop. On that same vein, how is that with raising kids, building a business but raising children?
Being an entrepreneur has made me a better mother, and being a mother has made me a better entrepreneur. Because in business, you have to be agile. You cannot stay stagnant or you will not be successful. You have to always be thinking short term, but you have to be thinking long term. What is my goal?
And you learned that from your experiences being an executive and then seeing what you missed. That kind of changed your perspective, like you were saying earlier, the new normal and your mindset of what scaling is and what it takes. And it's also making sure your family scales in the right direction, I guess.
Right.
Houston Apparel and Company, scaling again, but you're focused on oil and gas, which is, you're in Houston, it's huge. And so why oil and gas?
With that, there's so many opportunities, right? And one thing that I learned from a mentor in starting my own business and being an entrepreneur, you have to niche down even more than you think. Because the more you niche down into a market, an ideal client type, whatever it is, the more successful you're going to be. Because if you try to service everyone, you'll end up servicing no one, right? And so it was the best advice I ever received from a mentor. It's like, hey, if you're going to do this, you need to have a niche. Figure it out. What is your niche? I'm going to focus, since my corporate background, it makes sense for me to try to engage from a sales perspective with corporations because I came from one and I know kind of how they work. And so my business partner handled more of the small to medium businesses, tech and startups were kind of her niche. And then I handled all the corporate accounts. And so that's what I started doing. And we've been doing it for 2 years. And I've learned so much along the way. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And so I had to really take a step back and go, okay, so I understand this is a long play. I see that it is going to take some time for people to trust me, to understand what I do, to know me personally, I'm worthy to do business with, and that I have their best interests in mind. And so it was a slow roll at first. I got discouraged a lot of times, and I'm like, wow, this is way harder than I thought. This is going to take a lot more touches of, showing my worth as a person, taking care of their business in a business than I had ever anticipated.
So moving on to the partnership. So you had this experience as an executive, you had this experience as a solopreneur, and now you're co-founding a company with your almost ex-competitor.
Right.
And what do people underestimate about partnership like that?
I think people get very nervous because of conflicting ideas, but I love having someone with a different perspective than me to challenge what I think is right. Because I'm guilty of it just as much as the next person, of getting tunnel vision, and I'm basing maybe what I'm thinking about corporations based on my corporate experience, but not all corporations are the same. People don't like conflict, but I actually love with my partner that we can have a debate about it. And we've debated about a lot of things, and she's changed my mind on things, and I've changed hers. And I think it's just understanding, like, being a solopreneur and someone who loves to be in front of people and talk, and it's hard. And having a partner, having someone to bounce something off of, to be there, to go through the struggles and challenges and conflicts with, people underestimate that. It's far worse than whatever potential, hair raising can go on when a partnership is disagreeing. I think you have to think about it from having another person's perspective who shares the same values as you.
So instead of being up in bed staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m, trying to work through a problem and worry about it, you can call your co-founder and be like, hey, are you up? And work through the problem, or better yet, talk about it before the day ends and work through the problem from, like you said, a completely different perspective. She services a completely different industry.
Right.
And what was the impetus for servicing two completely different industries? What was the driver for that?
It played into both of our strengths because we had such great relationships in both of our worlds. How to navigate a corporation, she knows how to work these type of clients, that we just divide and conquer that way just so we could get more reach. And we did have some overlap. Certainly some of the larger projects we did hand in hand with some of the really big orders that we had. It required both of us. And so being flexible and adaptable too are great traits of a partner too. If something needed to be done, we got together and we got it done for our client.
So you came from this background of being this executive, overseeing these huge amounts of money and all these people, and now you're in this partnership. What systems or processes did you bring from the corporation to the startup?
The sales process, for sure. That was one of the things that I wanted to document early on, because we were both new-ish to the apparel industry, and so servicing a client in apparel is different than servicing a client in food. And so having to understand what are the different layers to peel back, who is our target customer, how do we identify them, and then go after it. So for me, it was setting up the sales strategy and the marketing. She and I set up both the sales and marketing strategy, and she more handled like the back end operations of things. And so we were a perfect match there, right? Like, I handle this, she's good at this, we confirmed with each other. But it was important for me to have those processes set up.
Well, like you learned from Sysco too, it can quickly just all fall apart if there aren't systems and processes and you start bolting on more teams, it's just not going to. So that gets to my next question. That's a perfect segue, actually. Is the goal to stay a boutique-ish kind of firm, or is it to scale up to, what's the goal?
So the goal is to scale, and we have done that. We've been in year 2 now, and I'm incredibly proud of the revenue generation that just the two of us have built. It's been an incredible ride. But for me, I feel pulled to do something different, and so I've been thinking it for a while, and I'm actually selling out of Houston Apparel Co. Effective this week, and selling my shares. In the process of working with our clients in oil and gas, energy, and construction, I noticed a trend. A lot of customers, the small to mid-size operators, don't have a sales and marketing. And when I started really looking at that and realizing there was a big need, these people, they don't want to hire an full-on internal team, but they need sales and marketing. So I started, just as a side, doing a couple projects with some clients and set up sales and marketing back end for them and got it going and consulted them along the way. Essentially a fractional sales and marketing executive for clients.
So they don't have to build out a full team. This is the culmination of everything, because everything you learned pre-Sysco, but then everything you learned from this storied institution, Sysco, starting it from scratch and building it yourself, and you learn from different vantage points, different things, and now you're applying that to say, hey, I can do this for you with the timely new fractional kind of model that's all the rage for many industries.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
You don't want to have to put another person on payroll. If you can get someone to build a system, execute the system, so specifically on the sales side, like I am the sales engine of it. And then I teach them how to use it. They can retain me, which a lot of them have for at least 6 months, I recommend. And then if they're ready, if they want to hire one person, then I can teach them the systems, get them going, and then move on to the next client. And it's been an incredibly fulfilling journey because people don't know what they don't know about sales and marketing. This is how you can scale. And I get such passion from that because as a solopreneur myself, as a business partner myself, I see it's so hard to scale. And if I could give someone that edge without having it cost them that extra number.
Are accretive to them because they spend a little bit of money, but they make so much back from it. Is this Houston, Texas, national?
It's national. Powell Consulting Group.
Powell Consulting Group, based in Houston, but servicing all businesses. You've been so generous with your time. I have just a few more questions to get kind of your experience. Obviously, has been hills and valleys similar to mine, and so it does give you a different lens from which to see life. So, how do you define success now?
Personally, being fulfilled with the work that I am doing, helping people at the core. That's what I want to do. I want to help them be more successful. I want them not to need me because I've helped them be so successful and set them on the right path. But it also looks like me being able to step back when I need to, when it matters the most, and to be with my family. And I think a lot of people that work in corporate America, it's very hard to make that decision. And trust me, I work my ass off on the entrepreneur side to be able to do that. It's not all sunshine and roses. But I've realized, like, I don't mind. I love the grind. I love being in front of people. I love helping them. But I have to do it on a time. I only have so many years left till my kids are out of the house, right? And how am I going to manage that time? So I want to do something that's fulfilling to me, that I can wake up every single day, be excited about, feel good about, know that I'm going to help someone, and then also be able to focus on what really matters at the end of the day, is family, and how to take care of them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So, final question. You get laid off out of the blue. You thought you were going to be there forever. You learned from that. You bounce back. What would you tell the executive who just got laid off today?
Just take a deep breath, turn to your network, turn to your people that are closest to you, and ask for help. That would be the big one, because it's hard. And a lot of people, I took it very personally, and it took me a long time to get out of that funk, out of that depression, just fighting that anxiety. But use the folks around you that love you. And a lot of people have a huge network, but they're ashamed, right? I'm ashamed I just got laid off. Like, oh, what am I going to do? But if people truly care about you, they don't care about that. They want to help you. So lean on your network.
I love that. It's funny when you open up to other people and tell them, hey, this just happened to me. You start learning that happened to them too 5 or 10 or 15 years earlier, and you had no idea, because there is a stigmatization to that, and people don't want to share the valleys, right? They just want to share the upsides, the hills. They don't want to share the downside. Thank you so much for all that you shared today.
Thank
That
you.
was wonderful and very insightful, and I wish you all the best for Powell Consulting Group.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's going to be very successful. Maybe we'll do another follow-up in a year, and we'll see.
I'm ready for anything.
Very good. Thank you, Jada Powell. Thank you.